Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Integrated Modeling for Roadway Condition Prediction. My name is Neelu Parvinashvili and I will help facilitate today's webinar. Today's webinar is hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO. At NOCO, we support the transportation systems management and operations community by offering a variety of resources. On your screen right now, you can see multiple pods. One of them is the useful links at the bottom left, where we share with you a few ways you can connect with us. You can check out our Knowledge Center on our website or subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter or our Twitter account. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording along with the presentation slides will be shared with you through our website. But if you want to be notified right away when there is a webinar recording available, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for that video recording. Also, you can now download the slides directly from the download slides pod that you can see on your screen. The audio connection information is also shared in a text pod with you right now. So that was just a few logistics that I wanted to cover, and with no further ado, I would like to hand it over to Gabe to start us off with the webinar. Gabe?
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, whatever the case may be, depending on where you're at in the country. Again, my name is Gabriel Guevara. I am with Federal Highway Administration, or the U.S. Department of Transportation. I would like to thank the National Operations Center of Excellence for hosting this webinar, and I would like to thank in particular Neelu Parvinashvili for taking care of all of the logistics in the conduct of this webinar. Also, I would like to thank our speakers for today, Mr. Kyle Garrett, who is the principal developer of the IMRCP model, IMRCP standing for Integrated Modeling for Road Condition Prediction, and Ms. Nancy Powell from Kansas City Scout, who agreed to be the first deployer of the tool. In other words, we are testing the tool and doing further development as it is being tested in the Kansas City Scout, Missouri, Kansas City region. I also would like to thank everyone that has joined this call. I know that you guys are very busy. You have a very busy schedule, and taking time off your schedule is something that we don't take for granted, and we appreciate it very much. So a couple of housekeeping issues. Neelu mentioned that we will be muting your phones for the beginning of the meeting until the Q&A session, which we will have at the end. So again, we will have a question and answer session at the end of this webinar, or towards the end of the webinar. However, I encourage you to start writing questions on the chat pod as questions occur to you.
Gabe, we're having issues hearing you.
Oh, my apologies. This presentation will be a tag team effort between Kyle Garrett, between Nancy Powell, which again is from Kansas City Scout, and she will not be addressing any slides directly, but as the principal tester of the system, she will be intervening as she deems it appropriate. And then myself, I will be doing some question from some slide. Okay, so a little bit about the speakers. Nancy Powell from Kansas City Scout. She is the TMC Traffic System Supervisor at Kansas City Scout. She joined Scout in 2004 as the first of two regional operators hired to specifically run the TMC, and she became a supervisor of the TMC 4 years later. Nancy has played a very significant role in the FHWA's road weather integration effort, which began in early 2009. Since 2004, she has worked in the areas of administration, budget support, and contract management and procurement for Scout. Ms. Powell's prior experience includes 20 years in public safety dispatch software development, operations, and training. She holds a BA in Communications and Education from the University of Missouri at Kansas City. Now about Kyle Garrett. Kyle Garrett is a founding principal of the consulting services firm Synesis Partners, and he has over 35 years of systems engineering and project management experience. In that time, he has worked with transportation systems, information technology, wireless commerce, and nuclear power. He was a lead author of AASHTO's Connected Vehicle Field Infrastructure Footprint Analysis and led the Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study, the SRC-based road weather application development. He has also been extensively involved with the road weather management program of FHWA, and in particular with the development and furthering of the weather data environment, and now the integrated modeling for road condition prediction. A little bit about myself. I am a registered professional civil engineer. I graduated from the University of Minnesota. I have over 25 years of transportation-related experience. I worked for 20 years for the Minnesota Department of Transportation, where I acquired experience in the areas of construction, research, traffic engineering, pre-design, final design, passenger rail planning, and maintenance operations. Also, I have spent the last 8 years working for the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, working as a transportation specialist, managing winter maintenance and connected and automated vehicle-related research projects. I am also an active member of PIARC, the World Road Organization, and TRB's Winter Maintenance Committee. Okay, so now we get to the meat of the webinar. We will get started with the slides. Okay, so we're here to talk about the integrated modeling for road condition prediction. As far as agenda and objectives, what we will be doing here is we will be describing the IMRCP objectives and the background. We will review and demonstrate the system functions. We will do that live over the internet. We will also describe the stakeholder opportunities that are available. And we will talk about plans for future research and demonstration opportunities. So as far as the objectives, the Road Weather Management Program has always been very active at developing tools that would help the stakeholder community that has to deal with weather issues address those issues, try to mitigate the negative impacts that weather can bring about to their constituency, to their states. We trying to shift from a reactive type of approach to a more proactive and predictive type of approach. So in order to move us in that direction, we thought about developing an integrated system for road condition prediction that incorporates real and or archived data and results from an ensemble of forecast and probabilistic models. Models such as atmospheric and road weather and hydrology, models such as traffic demand models, work zones and winter maintenance operations, incidents, special events, demand, you name it. If there is a model that predicts some type of a transportation-related object or data, we would like to incorporate that in our model. Anything that has an impact or may have an impact on the state of the system, the transportation system, we would like to bring that under the umbrella of the IMRCP. So what does the IMRCP does? Well, it uses the outputs of all of those models in order to predict the current and the future overall road travel conditions. We envision the system to be useful for travelers, transportation operators, and maintenance providers. So as far as benefits of the tool, we feel very strongly that the tool extends operator awareness from the current to likely future traffic and road conditions. It gives the transportation operators, the TMC staff, a better idea of the risk that the system will suffer or endure some type of a breakdown And it does that. You will see this as we get into the demonstration by providing alerts, generating and providing alerts to the TMC staff. It also allows the TMC operators or the infrastructure owner operators to better manage the strategies that they're going to be implementing, and to do that in a more effective way and in a more accurate way. We think that operators and travelers will be able to make better or more informed decisions. Transportation system operators will be able to enact traffic controls such as variable speed limits or ramp metering, gate closures, and so forth, with the best information possible, and having that information even ahead of the occurring situations or before the system actually breaks down. They should be able to deploy better traveler assistance tools and techniques. And travelers themselves, when and if they get access to the tool, they'd be able to make more informed decisions about their travel plan, whether they want to reroute or give up on the trip or whatever the circumstances may warrant. And now, as I said before, this is going to be a tag team effort, and Mr. Kyle Garrett will take the presentation from here. Before I drop off, I would like to remind you and encourage you to write questions in the chat pod, and we will address those towards the end of the webinar. Thank you. Kyle, take it from here.
Thank you very much, Gabe. You know, we want to make sure that everyone has enough context before we get into the demonstration, that you have a model in your head of what it is that we're trying to do and the means by which we're going to go do it. And one way of doing that is talking about the process we went through to develop the system. This has been thus far a three-phase effort. In the first phase, in IMRCP 1, we did a tech survey to see what kinds of predictive models were actually available out there. A good fraction of that was spent looking at traffic forecast models, traffic simulation models. There's a large variety of those, and we essentially looked at mechanistic and statistical models from the micro to the meso to the full network scale. We also looked at, of course, weather forecasting and the models that, for the most part, are available from the National Weather Service or from NOAA, but also looked at a few private models where that was appropriate. We also looked at hydrological models. As Gabe pointed out on a couple of slides ago, when we're talking about road conditions, we're not just interested in traffic or incidents for that matter. We're interested in weather, and even then, weather as it occurs actually on the roadway, not necessarily at 5,000 or 10,000 feet in the atmosphere. But we're also interested in knowing whether or not there might be water from a streamway that's accumulating or near the roadway. We certainly want to be notified if there was any flooding. So those kinds of models also had to be included. From that, we then generated a concept of operations and an architecture, some requirements for what a system would have to do. And that gave Federal Highway the chance to say, we like where this is going. These are the kinds of models that we do need to incorporate, or we wish that there were more that we could do, and we think there needs to be more information on particular types or classes of models. In the second phase of the study, IMRCP 2, the Federal Highway gave the go-ahead to develop and deploy this integrated modeling framework. So we built a system that integrates all of the traffic, weather, hydrological, and other data that Gabe had referred to into a data store, and then keeps it over time such that we build an archive and a real-time and a forecast data set over the network, the road network that we're modeling. And we then partnered with Kansas City Scout, which is itself a partnership of the Missouri Department of Transportation and the Kansas Department of Transportation, to deploy that in a subset of the Kansas City metro area. So you'll be seeing when we get into the demonstration that we have a road network, a rather complex one over both arterioles and interstate roadways. that includes streams. And then we've worked with Scout since then, hence Nancy being on the call with us, to actually give this to their operators to play with it, to see what kinds of events it's useful for. We made quite a few changes to the interfaces and to the way the system worked to try to accommodate a real operator's need. In the grand scheme then of IMRCP, we're now in phase 3. We want to take the learnings that we got from working with Scout in the prior phases and make some model enhancements. And we really want to drive it more and more to an operations focus. So in this particular phase, some of the enhancements that we're going to be talking about will be to add more and more traffic models. In phase 2, we worked with the Northwestern University Transportation Center to implement a TREPS Dynasmart traffic model, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We want to more finely tune that to the localized conditions and to some of the forecast opportunities that we have. We also want to add another traffic model. So the University of Cincinnati is working with us in this phase to develop a machine learning-based model that will run alongside the existing TREPS and Dynasmart model. And then we also want to increase the size of the deployment to not just a particular study area within part of the metro, but to really expand it out to everything that a Scout operator wants to see, the things that they're used to working with in their TMC. I also want to take this opportunity to at least give a little bit of a shout out to the development team. Working for Federal Highway, the prime contractor is Leidos. I'm at Synesis Partners, and we also have the Northwestern University Transportation Center, led by Dr. Hani Mamasani, the University of Cincinnati with Dr. Joshi Ma, and then, of course, Nancy Powell and her team at Kansas City Scout. Together, we've managed to find a good rhythm, and we're looking forward to the next couple of years' work on this in Phase 3. So I'm going to scoot on to the next set of couple of slides. I have to describe for you how the system is put together and what it actually does. I hate these eye charts myself, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. The IMRCP system itself has a lot of pieces and parts. On the left-hand side really are a set of clouds that represent all of the data sources that we either are currently using to draw into the system or would like to use. And I don't know whether you can read those on your screen. The top one has to do with road weather data and getting road weather data or weather data, which would include forecasts and real-time information from the National Weather Service. Then down at the bottom, we currently are gathering data from the Scout TMC and its ATMS and from some other traffic data services as they become available. In the middle in blue, we'd like to be able to do a better job of getting data from social media or from mobile data services. None of those are really available in the Kansas City area. We don't have any connected vehicle fleets currently operating here. We are hoping to get some AVL, that's automated vehicle location data, sometime in the next couple of years, but currently haven't implemented that. The dashed box in the middle represents the boundary of the system, and then within that there are a set of folders or packages that describe what it does. In the very middle, there's another dashed line box that represents the actual forecast components. So we have a dynamic traffic assignment model, that's the TREPS model. We have a machine learning traffic model. We also have road weather forecasts, and then we have hydrological forecasts. Those are the four basic forecast models. Around that we have just the nuts and bolts of what it takes to make a system operate. We have to collect data, we have to store it, we have to manage its archive, we have to be able to present all of the outputs of this on the web or through to an app, and so we have to set up all of those software components and network connections to do that. On the right-hand side in a set of clouds are the users, the people who ultimately care about this and the information that's being provided through it. So at the top we have an operations cloud, that's currently the folks at Scout, and then underneath that it could be people like other information service providers who want forecasts of of roadway conditions. Or it could be the travelers themselves. Say Scout someday decides that they want to start including forecast components in their dynamic message signs. It could be emergency responders, and it certainly could be work zone or highway maintenance staff. It could be winter maintenance. So that's just a quick rundown of the bits and pieces of the system. I also want to show you what we're dealing with in terms of the study area. We're going to be looking very shortly at the actual online, real-time demonstration of the system. But I think it's important to see how we got there. This is a map of the south central portion of the Kansas City area. I don't know whether you can see my mouse on here, but there's a line in the center, a little right of center, that represents the state line between Kansas on the left and Missouri on the right. I-435 is the heavy roadway that runs from east to west in the upper part of the figure. And then on the left is US 69, and on the right is I-49, which then splits off into I-470. I-435 also heads off to the north. We also have a set of arterioles and alternative traffic flows that could be modeled when you're not on the interstate highways. So for each one of the arterial intersections, we have to model a traffic signal. We have little aqua triangles that represent all the dynamic message signs along the interstate highways. We have, I think it's something like 205 traffic signals, 105 traffic detectors on the interstate highway. We have additionally 53 ramp detectors. The numbers get very big very quickly. And if you're a traffic modeler, you may want to know that there are 2,000 links and 870 nodes in the road network that's being modeled here. The physical extent of it is about 7 by 10 miles, 70 square miles. That's larger than the city of San Francisco, if that gives you some sense of scale. So although it's not the entire Kansas City metro area, it is a rather complex network. There's a lot going on within this set of models. Okay, and having given you that background, I think we want to move on to the demonstration and really get into the nuts and bolts of what the system does. So, Nilu, I think you have to give me, yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen where I have the system up now. Okay, so minimize that. So I had already logged into the system and had told it that to give me notifications. This gives you some idea what the operators asked to see. We have an incident currently on I-435 East between Blue River Road and I-49. I'm just going to dismiss that for the time being so I can talk about how the system is set up and works, and it'll come back at some point. So we have a map, a rather large one, and we have some menu items across the top. By default, when you log into the system, it just displays a blank map. We can also get reports. We have a help function that gives you some instructions on how to use the system. And if I wanted to log off, I have an item for that. The map itself works like so many other map applications that you've seen before. It has the ability to zoom in and zoom out within the map frame. It also has some things that are a little different. Along the bottom, you'll see that we've added or installed a time toolbar. So here in the middle, it says that it's currently 1:25 p.m. Central Time, and I can go back from that 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hours, up to 4 hours, or I can go forward from that up to 8 hours ahead of time. Below that, I also have another menu that allows me to select what I actually want to display on the map. So I have road data or area data or point data, and then I have a couple of flags that relate to whether or not I want to keep up in time. In other words, do I want the map display to refresh once every minute? and then the notification that I already turned off since when I switched over to it, we had that notification on the map. I also have a button we'll get over here to later on reporting and subscribing to data from the system, and then I have a current date to go with the time that's here. So let's bring some information up on the map. If I click on the little scroll button for display road data, you'll see that I have a number of things that I can display on the map. In the middle, I have a measure of traffic, and we do this because it's so similar to what people are used to seeing with Google Maps or Bing Maps or anything like that that might also display traffic. Scout's own website displays something like this. And I'm going to zoom in one so that it fills the display better. So here we see I-435 going across your screen, and then up I-49 here on the right-hand side, and then US 69, which is also a limited access freeway here on this part. And then a number of arterioles, some of which are 4-lane divided arterioles, some of which are really undivided, in some cases even 2-lane roadways. And you can see that most of the network right now is green. In other words, the traffic is flowing at or very, very near the local posted speed limit on that roadway. Not much to see here. A few slow arterioles where perhaps traffic got backed up behind a signal. I can also display area data. And here we see things like air temperature, radar, precipitation rate and types. I can also display National Weather Service alerts. And that just gives you a layer on top of the traffic layer. So right now, if I were to select the precip rate and type, you'd see that we actually do right now have light rain pretty much over the entire study area that we're working in. And then lastly, I can also display point data. So that could be information from traffic detectors, which I can show you there. Or it could be alerts, and I have several classes of alerts. I have traffic alerts, road condition, and weather alerts. For the moment, I'll just pick the traffic alerts. Over here to the upper right is that incident that we had the notification for, and you can see we have a number of little work zones scattered out here along I-435. It is the season after all, so we have lots of cones and dividers and Jersey barriers up. All right, so having done all that, I want to explain what's going on with the time slider. You may have noticed now that it's keeping track because I have it in an automated refresh of where we are relative to real time. It's 1:28 p.m., which is accurate for the central time zone. But if I go forward and backward from there, I can actually look back in time or forward in time. So I can go back, and let's say we go back an hour to 1:27 p.m., and you can see that the precipitation pattern was different then. Traffic didn't look that much different. It's kind of the middle of the day, so we don't expect a lot of congestion on any of our freeways. I can also, from there, change the display of what's being shown on the roadway. Maybe I'm not interested in traffic. It's been raining, so I might want to look at the pavement state. And in this case, for whatever reason, it says that the pavement's dry, perhaps because there was enough traffic to keep it from being too wet. Maybe there was a break in the rain, and these are just light showers. And, you know, as we get into the winter season, you'll be able to look at things like pavement temperature and snow depth, and those might be interesting to folks. We can also go forward in time. And if I go past the current time of 1:29 p.m., let's say I want to go to 2:27 p.m., you'll see that the display's changed, and we're expecting the rain to be pretty much over by then. That information comes directly from the National Weather Service. We're not imposing any intermediate interpretation of their forecasts. So this might be out of sync with what you would get from, you know, your real-time local weather channel, but it is the best information that we can get from the National Weather Service. And you can actually go out as much as 8 hours ahead of time. I have no idea what the evening forecast is here tonight. If I were to look at 6:15 p.m., it looks like it's supposed to dry out for the rest of the afternoon. So that gives you some idea of what you can see ahead in the forecast. if I stay within a 2-hour window, I can actually even get forecasts of the traffic. And here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, again, it's not yet rush hour, so I don't expect to see much slowdown on any of the predictable congested locations here along this heavy commuter corridor. I can also look at, let me go back here to the current time. I can actually get very detailed information on what's going on any of these roadway segments by hovering over it and highlighting it, and I can actually get a detailed list of all of the observation types that have to do with that roadway. So for example, on I-435 eastbound between Roe Avenue and State Line, I'm currently getting a TREPS traffic prediction of 110% of its normal speed. In other words, if the speed limit's 65, it's guessing that it's probably going to flow at about 72 miles an hour. Whether that's actually the case or not, of course, we're not sure. We have a set of some other information from TREPS. It actually provides us with density and occupancy numbers. We can get pavement state from the Metro pavement condition model. It tells me that the pavement is dry, which is a little surprising since it has been raining. But I can also get a pavement temperature. 100.24 F sounds a little high today. It's not quite that warm. But again, that may just be the way that we have the metadata set up for that particular piece of pavement. Okay. I want to show you a couple of other options that we have as well. One of the things that was expressed as being of interest are travel times. So on the road display, I can also select routes. And we have a limited number of routes for which we compute travel times, both in the current state and in the future. So for example, I can highlight, let's see, two notifications. We've had another incident happen now, and you can see that here. If I highlight this segment, I can get a travel time that says on I-435 westbound between Holmes Road and I-435 westbound at Metcalf, I can get an estimated route travel time of 4.3 minutes, which makes sense. That's only about 4.5 miles. I can also go ahead in time, and I can see that at 3:08 p.m., I can find exactly the same segment. It's going to be 4.4 minutes. And those are estimates that come from this traffic forecast model. Scout is typically will display on a lot of its message signs these kinds of estimated travel times. And so we wanted to be able to provide those not just based on the current traffic conditions, but for the forecast traffic as well. Did I see that we have a couple of questions? Maybe Nancy or Gabe, you can read those to me because I can't see them on my screen right now.
Well, the only thing that I see is a full screen. Oh, someone was asking about full screen sharing to see a larger scale of the presentations. But that's the only thing. No specific technical questions, but keep them coming, folks. We're ready to answer them.
Okay. A couple of other things that I want to show you on the interface here. And let me turn off some of these display layers so that it cleans up the display a little bit. Down here in the lower corner, we have a report and subscribe button. I don't know that I will start this up all the way, but I can get reports, or in fact, I can subscribe to data from the detectors, from the roadway segments themselves, or even from the areas, the weather, atmospheric weather conditions over an area. So, for example, if I wanted to subscribe to segment data, it would highlight for me all of the roadways that are in our network. I could pick one. This one. In fact, I could pick two if I hold down the control button, and I can get multiple segments. And then I would go back down to the corner and set the selection, and it would ask me, well, what do you want to know about conditions on that roadway? And it gives me then a box that lists all of the possible attributes of that roadway that I could want to see. That it's a combination of both the traffic conditions and weather conditions. For example, I might want to see traffic and the precipitation category, what kinds of precipitation are happening. And then it would create for me a CSV file, and it would run that at a particular reference time. This is more or less the current time, 1:35 p.m. And then I use these little buttons to indicate, well, for what time domain. I want 8 hours in the past, and I just want the past, so I set this one to 0. Or maybe I just only want to look at the forecast for the next 4 hours. In that case, I would set it that way. I can also create a subscription. And this might be useful if you had another system that you wanted to send the forecast outputs to. That would say then, give me another option which says, well, how often do you want to run that subscription? 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And again, it would let me set whether that's in the past or the future. And then I would submit that, and it would create those reports or subscriptions. Okay, let me zoom back out. One of the most exciting features we think about this is the ability to go forward in time, certainly, and look at the immediate forecasts, but we can also go back in time and look at events. Today, we happen to be fortunate that we actually had some rain in the area that I could show you. And you can see that it even varies between being, moderate and light rain. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you look at the weather and there's nothing going on. So we gave ourselves the ability to do time traveling, as Nancy likes to call it. I can actually open this little dialog, and I can go back in time to look at prior events and the things that had happened in the past. This might be a useful feature if you want to do an event reconstruction, maybe around weather conditions or roadway conditions around a particular incident. It could be, as I'm going to show you now, that we want to go back and look at a weather event that's associated with this network. I'm going to take us way back to last summer. We have data currently in the system since about the very first of 2017, so a year and a half's worth of data. I'm going to go back to July of 2017. And in particular, on the 27th, we had some very, very heavy rain early in the morning, just right before rush hour. And we're going to see if we can go see what that event looked like. So I'm going to pick July 27th. I'm going to go back to, let's say 6 o'clock in the morning. So I have to use this other little gadget here. And go back to 6 o'clock in the morning. And you can see that we had a different different construction area going on at the time. This entire section of 435 was under construction. I left the precipitation rate turned on, so you can see that at 6 a.m., let me adjust my slider there just a little bit. At 6 a.m., we had pretty widespread light rain, but we also had some other stuff going on. At 6 a.m., we actually also had some flooded roadways. The event earlier that morning had been serious enough, we'd gotten enough rain that along this creek, Indian Creek, that kind of runs east to west underneath 435 and along that corridor, we actually did have some flooding along some of the roadways. This is a bridge, or actually this is the approach to a bridge over that creek here on State Line Road. And the system showed that the water levels that were being monitored at those locations were sufficient that, in this case, it has to load the data from the archive, so it takes just a second, well, several seconds. Oops. That shows you what happens when I didn't test that earlier today. Trust me, there is water over the roadway at that location, actually at multiple locations here along that low-lying area along the creek. Here's some more over here. So that was in a case where we had minor flooding. The system monitors the hydrology that's coming in and will be able to show us both in the future and in the past what had happened. I checked earlier this morning. I think we had, yes, we still had forecasts of flooding out to about I think it was 6:45. Yeah, so if I go to 6:50 a.m., you'll see that it's forecasting that the water will have subsided and none of those will be underwater anymore, even though we're still forecast to be getting, medium rain at that time. I can also go back and you can see that the heavy rain, as I recall, started at about 5 in the morning. Even before that, some of the roadways were even starting to show some inundation an hour before I had gone back in time. All right. I want to show you a couple other events that we had in the system. So I'm going to go back to my calendar tool here. We also had a couple of ice and snow events. If I go to February of this year, 2018, on February 4th, we had an ice and snow event. It was actually quite a mix of precipitation. And I'm going to go back to, about 1 in the afternoon, I think it was. Yeah, let's try that. Well, we didn't have any flooding. We did have a lot of icy roadways, and we had some reasonably heavy snow. And in this case, all of the pavement is covered light blue because we had snow and ice on virtually the entire network. If I go back in time from that point, though, say 2 hours, 11 o'clock maybe, you can see that the pavement was dry and that we were just starting to get that heavy precipitation. And as I step through in time, we should see that the roadway is starting to get some freezing rain on the roadway. And then as I go forward even from there, you can see that some of the freezing rain has melted. Some of it's already starting to freeze back here, or get snow on the roadway rather, the light blue snow. And we had some freezing rain, and then if I scoot just even a little bit more forward, it all goes to light snow. So here's an event that, we had a lot going on. We had incidents popping up all over the place. We had a real mix of precipitation. If I were to show you, let me see if I can see what the traffic looks like. You can see that we had a lot more of the roadways that were not actually green, and we had traffic slowdowns all over the place. Here's a segment that has dropped, quite a bit. It's probably 45 or 50 miles an hour. So people are driving more cautiously. We see those impacts on the arterioles first. This gives you an idea of how it might be useful, the tool might be useful in looking ahead at these kind of events. If I go past 1 p.m. to, say, 2:30, you can see that the precipitation is pretty much gone. Traffic is recovered. It's, of course, still in the middle of the afternoon. And by that point in time, we were forecasting that we would have some just melted rain or some water-snow mix on some of the roadways. We'd still have some snow and ice. It takes longer than that to melt after all. And if I go way out in time, as it starts to cool off during the day, I think the forecast got colder. We still had this residual layer of very thin snow and ice on all the roadways. I saw some questions pop up. Nancy, can you help me with those and let me know what folks are interested in?
Sure. The first question came in from Samir, and his question is, does it contain data like geometric and drain system? I think he's referring to the hydrology data. Is that correct, Samir? Oh, he's probably muted until we get to the end. But that was his question.
No, that's okay. I can answer that question. There are certain areas, the hydrology data that we get are all coming from the National Weather Service, and specifically from the Advanced Hydrological Prediction System, that AHPS. That system provides, in this study area, very detailed inundation maps for 3 or 4 locations where the topology of the streamway and the roadway is very, very well known. So we were able to use those inundation maps than to actually calculate a depth on the roadway. In other locations where maybe we have streamway sensors, we can get the stage that's being sensed by that streamway sensor and maybe generate an alert that's very particular to that location. For example, it may say that it is, approaching flood, or it might be a flood stage warning, or it could even be a major flood if it's actually inundated the roadway and the surrounding terrain. So this system does not have built in it the very, very detailed surface topology. It does have an overall sense of what the elevations are. We use the National Elevation Database so that at any given location or every given roadway on the map, I'll pick just one of the low-lying ones here. You'll see that it does have a latitude and a longitude for that particular segment, and as it loads the data, it should be looking up an elevation to go with that as well. Yeah.
Samir, does that answer your question? If not, just add in the chat bot what you want to know more specifically. I think that may have answered it. Kyle, we also have a question from Richard Davies, who asks, can you return the data to show the traffic impact of incidents on the network instantaneously and then reset traffic controls?
That's an interesting question. Nancy, do you want to, well, let me answer the technical question about the system first, and then maybe you can reflect on that. Let me get back. I'm just going to go back to the now. I think we actually had an incident there. Yeah, we have a couple going on right now. Oops. Went the wrong way with the scroll button. Let me change this display to traffic. And let me turn off the precipitation layer, which takes a long time to load. Okay, here we go. So here's I-435. We have an incident. If I click on that, it's actually a stalled vehicle, so here we wouldn't expect to see much traffic impact. And it's on the eastbound lanes. So if I zoom in just a little bit, make sure I pick the right lane. This is currently showing that it's on the shoulder. Traffic is not slowing down for that. I don't know if I have this one. This one's also a stalled vehicle. So we don't have one that's actually blocking any lanes. The incident reporting comes directly from Scout, and so we use their reports of incidents to actually feed the forward traffic predictions. That includes getting information from Scout as to their estimates of how long that incident is going to be there. So right now, these are stalled vehicles. It's not really showing any traffic impact. If we did have an incident blocking multiple lanes during rush hour, then yes, the system will pick that up and will show the traffic being slowed not only in the current time, obviously, but also in the future up until the point that it's expected to be cleared. We've toyed with the idea of adding actual incident forecasting to the system. That's very, very difficult to do. If you are a student of the literature, you'll see that people have tried to come up with incident forecast methods that look at weather conditions and traffic conditions and day of the week and special events, those kinds of things, to try and identify traffic network conditions that would be more likely to lead to incidents than not. In general, the literature suggests that those kinds of incident forecasts aren't reliable enough to implement and to depend on. So we've chosen at this point in the process to not implement any of those for this.
Then this is Nancy, and I might just add, Richard, that since we are the interstate and major highway system traffic management center, we don't deal at all on the arterioles. In this case, we wouldn't have necessarily traffic controls along the interstates. But the information that we get using the IMRCP model gives us a real good glance at what is happening on the roadways, in addition to our other ATMS things that the operators are using. Keeping the IMRCP map up, particularly during an event, has proven to be very helpful in just knowing what's coming helping us identify where we may need to plant resources, where we may need to establish some traffic control for perhaps a heavy rainfall that's coming down in one area where we know we have instances of ponding. We may want to get a truck out there to help clear those drains. So it's used differently than it would be used for setting traffic controls on an arterial. I hope that answers your question.
And I should also add to that, Scout does have some ramp metering deployed along both US 69 and along I-435. Typically those are used only selectively, I'll say it that way. The system does have the ability to include the impacts of ramp metering. We haven't exercised that very often. I don't actually have a case that I can show you this afternoon.
And Richard just asked,
follow up there, Nancy.
Yeah, he just asked, can we inform the drivers through our VMS system? Our system, the dynamic message signs, is what I'm assuming you're referring to, and yes, we can. We do that typically for all traffic incidents. What we're hoping IMRCP will do is enable us to be able to put out more realistic, actionable information regarding weather and road conditions. So yes, we can, and we would be using this as a tool to help us make that message more impactful instead of just saying, the media will let them know that there's a storm predicted for the next 24 hours. We want to be able to do it with a more of immediate impact for those motorists already on the roadway.
All right, I want to show you one other one other event. Again, back in February, we also had an icing event that was a little scary, not as severe as a lot that we've seen historically in the Kansas City area, or as bad as certain other metros have seen over the last couple of years. But on February 22nd, at about 6:45 in the morning, let me scroll back to that. I'll go to 7 a.m. That's just before our rush hour starts in this area, but if I look at the pavement state again, and maybe let's say look at the precipitation rate, I don't remember that it was actually raining very heavily at that point, but there was some icing on the roadways. And I found what was interesting about this particular event was that, you know, some of the lower lying roadways, especially along streamways, in the wintertime actually can be warmer. And we see some of that effect. And then we also can see the effect of the weather moving across the area. I think if I go back an hour, well, maybe more, maybe 5 a.m., yeah, you can start to see that this was a long, slow event. We had some segments of the roadway that just had water and snow mix as it was starting to freeze, and it was just a messy time. Here you can see the precipitation was 3 in the morning. We think that the benefit here is that you don't just necessarily get an indication of what the overall conditions are, but that you can actually see down to the level of individual pavement segments. I don't know that I can show you exactly when and where, but within the model here, we actually distinguish between those segments that are bridges and those segments that are at grade. So, let's see. Well, I happen to know that this segment is a flyover, for example. I hope it is able to fetch the data. I haven't had much luck with this for the demo. But this segment is a flyover, and it's actually modeled separately. Each piece of that, even if it's not a traffic model link, can be broken into multiple segments depending upon whether it's bridge or not. You could also do that if, for whatever reason, you wanted to model individual pavement segments. Say one was maybe an asphalt pavement and one was a concrete pavement. You could actually model the thermal characteristics of those pavements separately, which plays back into some of the maintenance decision support systems that I know some agencies have deployed for their network. Okay, I think, unless there are any more questions on the specific features of the interface and its ability to go back and forth in time, both for a particular, working from now ahead, but also going back and looking at historical events. Unless there are questions, I want to get back to and talk about what is coming next with the IMRCP. So I'm going to get out of this demo, and Nilu, I think I may need your help here. I'm going to stop sharing that, and we'll go back to the slides. Thank you. So what are the lessons learned so far? We actually had a relatively formal evaluation stage in the last phase 2 that we completed in 2017. And I'm just going to give you a very top-level view of what some of the conclusions were from that. One of the first ones, and I think we've already seen that in what we've looked at, is that the quality of the results for both traffic and weather really depend on all the foundational systems. In other words, do I have good models of the roadway? Do I know, if I'm calculating a pavement temperature, what the type of pavement is? Was I able to capture hydrologically, were the underlying models actually showing all the culvert systems, and were those inundation models accurate? But it also can be things like in the traffic models and in the roadway models that feed traffic, do I even have the right curvature on a segment so that I get the right visibility ahead? Do I have the right slope of the pavement up and down? People tend to slow down as they drive up a hill. People tend to drive faster as they go down a hill. So there's a lot of that kind of data, that metadata, what's the right word? Underlying foundational data that we need. We also need lots of traffic data. And we'll talk about this a little bit as we talk about the phase we're currently working on. But as many detectors as Scout has out there along the network, there are no traffic detectors on any of the arterioles in the study area that we selected. So even though the traffic models that we have had the ability to simulate the traffic signal actuations and timing, we didn't have any traffic data on arterioles to support that. So we weren't able to implement the full arterial traffic data model there. The second big conclusion that we came to was that we were perhaps looking too much at just the normal workday. In other words, what's the normal set of traffic conditions? And we've taken some steps to try to fix that in what we did in the last phase and what we're going to be doing in the current phase. But the bottom line was that the system has to account for unusual events. One of the things that we're doing in the new phase, for example, is adding the ability to model special events. So, for example, Kansas City Chiefs game obviously has an effect on traffic. It's probably less on the Sunday morning traffic flow than it is on a Thursday evening game, but we need to be able to account for those kinds of things. We also found that we need to invest in calibration and testing, especially of the traffic models. There's only so much we can do with information that we get from National Weather Service. We know that we need to do more to shake out the pavement temperature calculations, for example. But the biggest gap that we had on phase 2 had to do with the traffic models and making sure that we had accommodated all of the daily variations in traffic as well as the weekly variations, and then picking up the special conditions that went with a snow event or an ice event or localized flooding. Not that happens very often, but those are special sets of conditions that all require calibration of the traffic models. So we tried to do some of that in phase 2, but we're really going to focus that in phase 3 that we're currently on. 3 more of those. And maybe, Nancy, you want to follow me up on this, but one of the first things that we learned when we sat down in front of the TMC operations staff with the system was they don't need to know what they already know. So, for example, as I showed you, we were putting out notifications not just of heavy snow starting in 2 hours, but there's an incident on I-435. Well, they already knew that. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to give the operators, the users of the system, more control over what they get notified of. And in particular, they really only want to know what's different or what's unusual. So again, one of the features that we've embedded within the system is that we actually keep an ongoing set of statistics now, and we really only report or notify users when traffic conditions are completely outside the norm. There's no reason to let an operator know that to expect slow traffic at rush hour this afternoon. They know it's going to be slow. If we had slow traffic, in the middle of the afternoon for whatever reason, maybe a heavy thunderstorm was moving in, that they want to know about. Nancy, did I capture that well?
You certainly did.
All right, a couple more. As this system matures, we think there'd be a lot of advantages of being able to integrate some of the outputs at least directly into an ATMS. We didn't have that in the prior phase. So for example, the notifications that you saw pop up on the screen here would actually be more useful if those were being fed to Scout's ATMS so that it came up on the normal interfaces that they use on a day-to-day basis. Having another set of screens for this system sitting next to theirs isn't necessarily the best way to do that as this matures and needs to get more, become more normally used as part of their routine. And then lastly, at least amongst the lessons learned from the prior phase, were that we need to develop scenarios for using this. What kinds of predictions are actually useful? How would, for example, knowing that there's going to be a snowstorm affect traffic operations in particular? We already know that it affects winter maintenance operations. Somebody has got to call in the plow drivers. They got to go make sure their plow trucks are going to be ready to go, that they've got salt to put down, or if they're pre-treating, that they've got enough brine solution to work with. But beyond that, if the system becomes aware of special events, and it's maybe a Thursday evening, and for the television networks moved it up such that people wanted to get to the stadium at 5 p.m. instead of at 7 p.m., how would that actually manage what Scout, or change what Scout does? Would it change ramp metering settings? Would it lead to wanting to dispatch somebody to close a roadway earlier so that we can direct one-way traffic to get into the stadium? Things like that. And those are not fully explored in the prior phase of the study.
But I'd like to add that those are the very steps that make us increasingly excited about being able to continue with this pilot at Scout, because that provides information that we do not now currently have. And when Kyle mentions the integration piece into the ATMS that the operators use, that is going to just facilitate much more timely response to incidents, the ability to quickly put up message boards, and the operators understand the benefits that IMRCP is going to bring to their work, so we're very excited about the next steps that are coming in Phase 3.
Which gets us exactly to what we want to try and get done in the current phase of work. Thank you for the nice segue.
Sure.
For Phase 3, we number one, need to enhance the system's relevance to operations. You can think of Phase 2 as kind of the proof of concept. Can we actually do this? Gabe didn't mention it when we started the call, but when this work first came out and as we started on it, he disclosed that within his group at Federal Highway, this was called the Holy Grail project. Is this actually something that's even doable, or is it just a pipe dream? And I think in Phase 2, we were able to demonstrate that, no, this is doable. It has its limitations, but the current technologies can make this work. For Phase 3, we want to go beyond the what can we do to how is it useful, as Nancy said. And that really gets down to improving the accuracy of the traffic predictions giving the operators more confidence that we're not just giving back to them the same data that we got from them, but that our forecasts of what's going to happen an hour or 2 hours, or at least for weather data maybe even 4 or 8 hours ahead of time, make sense, that they match what actually happened. We also need to make the model area more consistent with what the operations staff wants to see. We focused, because of the level of effort in building the models, on a reasonably large, but still, compared to the whole metro, small area of Kansas City. So we're going to expand that, and we need to make the interfaces more useful. And that's something we're working on. For Phase 3, we're also going to operate the system over a sustained period. In fact, 2 full years, or at least 2 full winter seasons and the summers in between. As irony would have it, even though Kansas City is known for very highly variable weather conditions, we didn't really get much snow or ice over the last couple of years. If the current forecasts from the Farmer's Almanac are correct, they're suggesting that the weather that we're going to get this winter could actually break some records. We'll believe it when we see it, but we do actually hope, forgive me MoDOT and KDOT, but that we actually get some heavy winter weather. And then for Phase 3, we're also investigating how easy it would be to replicate and automate the building of these models. If, for example, some MoDOT in Springfield or St. Louis wanted to replicate the success that we've shown here in Kansas City, what level of effort would have to go into building those models and taking the lessons learned and applying them in a different geographical area with different streamways, with different weather conditions, certainly with different roadway networks. So that's what we're about. Just to give you some idea of what that means for the model itself and the extent, the area in the lower middle that is, well, it's supposed to be red. It's hard to see perhaps on your screen. That shows all the arterioles is our current study area that we just looked at in the demonstration. The scout area of operations across Kansas City is loosely shown by all of these detector locations, the little black diamonds, that cover all of the major interstate highways. So I-35, which starts in the southwest part of the city and goes to the northeast. I-435, which is a ring road around the city. We have a couple of other, one other forming ring layer that goes out to 470 and up Missouri 291. And then we also have a couple of other very, very significant roadways. I-70 cuts across the middle from east to west, and then I-29 to the northwest, and I-49 down to the southeast of Kansas City. I don't know how many actual highway miles that is, but it's a lot for a metro area of 2 million people, as we are in Kansas City. Geographically, from the very southwest to the northeast, I think it's about a 40-mile stretch. So this is about 1,600 square miles that we're going to have to be monitoring. We won't be modeling all of the arterial roadways, again, because we don't have data from those roadways anyway, but we will be modeling all of the major interstate highways and state highways, for that matter, U.S. highways that are limited access roadways, otherwise monitored by either detection or cameras by Scout. So I'll also say this gives us a challenge here. The actual detector data that we get from Scout really only covers part of the network. There's a length of I-435 in the very northern part of the city where we have very little detection, partially because we haven't needed it, but also partially because there's been reconstruction, and any detectors that were originally installed maybe 20 years ago in that roadway have perhaps been milled out in mill and overlay operations and haven't yet been replaced by remote detection as opposed to in pavement detection.
Kyle,
So,
this is Nancy. That's a very timely response to show what the projected new study area is going to be, the size of it. Richard asks again, or the National Operations Center of Excellence has asked, how do you manage and store the large amount of data? Very timely question, because the data is increasing exponentially. I'll let
yes,
you
it
handle
is. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I don't think when we built the system or started building the system 3 years ago, we knew that it would have to be very large. So we have a dedicated server onto which all of these components are built. It collects the data, stores it all there, as well as performs the actual forecast computations. That's a 46 processor server. I believe it has 16 gigabytes of actual machine memory, and I think it has 8 terabytes of disk storage on it currently. We're having to expand that as we've collected historical data to train the traffic models. I think we're currently at about 6 terabytes, so we're going to have to expand our storage up to 16. We have weather data from the National Weather Service going back to 2010 now, covering the entire United States, because at least the continental 48 states, because that's the way it's packaged by the National Weather Service. We also have traffic data from Scout going back to, I think now 2008, for all of their detectors and all of their incidents. It's a very, very large data set. I guess I can add to that as well that the data is actually not stored directly in a standard relational database like Oracle or, for that matter, a SQL Server. It's largely stored in data files, mostly in the native formats, because we find that, for example, with National Weather Service, their data formats are very specifically structured to compress the data as we need it for our computations. We extract it from those native files, get the pieces we need, perform the computations, and then rewrite all of our output data into another set of files, all in real time. So, in the interest of making sure we don't run out of time, I'm going to run ahead. Please continue to put any questions in the chat pod. Actually, I guess, Richard, I'll answer your question before I go on. Can we use the model to develop a set of pull-down menus for traffic diversions for specific occurring incidents? You know, that's one of the things, actually, I was going to get to here in our next steps. Scout has asked, because there are so many levers and buttons on the system, can they save their views, their favorite views of the system? And to the extent that we can, we're going to enable them to do that. All of the feature sets of what kind of data do I want to look at any given point in time, maybe what portion of the network am I as an operator responsible for. I'm going to make this up, Nancy, don't cringe, but let's say one of our operators at the TMC is very specifically chartered with monitoring conditions along I-70. We're going to give them the ability to zoom in on very specific lengths of I-70 so that they can look at, say, traffic speed or, for that matter, pavement conditions. They may or may not be interested in looking at weather, but they might want to know as soon as there are weather alerts. And we'll allow them to set all that up for their default view as a very specific user in the system. Maybe that answered the question. We're also going to continue to add new data types as we get new sets of data in. So one of them, for example, is we're going to add hydrological stations to the map so that if you are actually monitoring and interested in the water level measurements under a particularly known water, either a bridge or a low water crossing somewhere in the network, that you would be able to go straight to that and look at what the HPS forecast is for that particular location. So I hope that answers the question. We're also going to be expanding the study area. I just showed you that. We're going to be enhancing that TREPS traffic model that we had been using in Phase 2. It will still cover the same area within the overall Kansas City Metro, but it's really going to be tuned down to very, very particular sets of conditions using a set of scenarios within that TREPS model. So the preliminary results that I've seen, and honestly can't share with you yet, show that we're going to get very, very precise forecasts of the onset of, for example, the onset of congestion in the afternoon and how an incident or a particular set of incidents might delay that or, in fact, speed it up. We're also going to be adding an additional model. Generically speaking, you could call it a Bayesian model, but more specifically, it's actually a machine learning model that uses a set of a Markov time series, if you really want to get down into that level of detail. We're going to be deploying all of those enhancements prior to the upcoming winter season. We're going to continue to work with Scout and, in fact, other stakeholders, and I want to get to that very specifically, to make sure that the system works as maintenance people or as operators need it to work, and then operate and evaluate that over the next couple of years. I mentioned stakeholders. We actually have a core working group already that helps shape the research and the demonstration. We initiated that group at the beginning of Phase 2 over 2 years ago, and they've hung with us. We've added a few people as we've gone along. What they do is to sit through some of development webinars, just like we've had this one today, describing generally what the system does. We'll take them through not just looking at the system, but here are the features that we're trying to build into it. Does this make sense to you as somebody who is very experienced and accomplished with monitoring hydrological conditions in low-lying areas, for example? Or it could be operations folks, or it could be traffic forecasters, people who are very, very skilled in traffic prediction systems. They also, on the prior phase, Scout and some of the other folks in that core working group help us set our objectives and expectations for the system and how we ought to be anticipating the coming season. And then they went through the final experience review for Phase 2 with us, and we're looking forward to doing similar things here in Phase 3. The broader operations community, including, of course, those of you who are on the call with us today, we try to have events like this one on NOCO. We've had similar events with the road weather community as we've gone along to keep everybody informed. For this phase of the project, we have already had some core working group conversations, a kickoff meeting. We're having this webinar in August, and as you can see, we're going to have a whole set of other events through this fall and winter as we get started, but then regularly through the next, through all of 2019 and into the summer of 2020, when we would have our final stakeholder webinars and reviews with our core working group. Okay, just by way of summary, we're kind of getting down to the nub end of our time together. Just a couple of things to highlight. Number one, that the IMRCP, Integrated Modeling for Road Condition Prediction, was intended from the get-go, and we believe now can extend operational awareness from now to what's next. As Gabe started, and I hope as Nancy has reinforced, you know, TMCs and traffic management systems have done a very, very good job now as they've matured of letting operations folks, or for that matter maintenance folks who are sitting under winter storm conditions, understand what's currently going on the roadway. The gap has always been with what's next. The weather community has helped that out to the extent it can, but we've never had the traffic side of, okay, given that weather condition, what does that mean for the traffic? And we think that we now have the tools and the framework to go do that. This Kansas City deployment has really helped demonstrate the flexibility and extensibility of the system that we've built. It showed us that we needed some improvements in some of the user interface features, but also that there were things that we could provide that weren't necessarily useful to traffic operators. So we backed off on some of those, tried to listen very carefully to what they've had to say, and going ahead, we're adding a new set of capabilities that hopefully will narrow that down and allow them to fine-tune how they use the system. We really want to move their focus from the current conditions to the future. And then lastly, we're going to extend, or we are extending, and we have some new model deployments that will move us from demonstrating the capabilities to really looking at the decision support. If there's anything we want to focus on over the next couple of years with Scout and with whoever else wants to join the party, we really want to look at how the system and its capabilities could be used to help us make better decisions, get better messages out to travelers, or to help direct maintenance and traffic operations, even in terms of things like, ramp metering on the actual road network. So that's kind of the summary of, what we've done with IMRCP, how it works, where we hope to be going from here. I think we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. I really thank you for the ones you've asked thus far, but I think if you will go ahead and put those in the chat pod, we'll focus on questions for the remainder of our time together.
And I would just like to add, from the user's point of view, this entire project, it's extremely complicated in its design and the model and the internal workings of how this thing works. It's extremely complicated, but the user interface is so very simple. It's web-based. You simply log in. It doesn't require another system in the background to be operating. Because of its web-based availability, people can use it and access it on a smartphone. Those people would not only be our TMC staff here at the center, but the maintenance foremen, the superintendents that are getting ready to deploy crews out to treat a snowstorm would have the availability to be able to look ahead, see what it's looking like, and make better informed decisions about when to pull the trigger to go and take action. Currently, we don't have a formalized MDSS system. We rely on the expertise of the people that are in those roles, managing those crews. But this gives them an extra tool to be able to reference very quickly and make better informed decisions. And when we make decisions based on data, they always come out better. The flip side for us, and the added benefit for us, the time travel ability, I keep selling this as a time travel tool for transportation, is the fact that we can now be able to go back in time using the slide bar of IMRCP and be able to do much better informed after-action reviews following a storm. There's always, after a big major snow, there's a series of conference calls to determine, well, how did we do? Now we actually have data that we can go back and look at to say, well, what did we know about this storm and when did we know it, and did we utilize that information effectively? How much did we save by holding off of our efforts until the road conditions warranted treatment? In some cases, our operating philosophy has always been, we have a storm, we're going to attack it, and we go at it full throttle. Well, in some cases, that misses the point. If we just send maintenance crews out to plow their designated routes, that may be ineffective. Some of those routes might not need as much treatment as another route that we could move those resources to very effectively. So for us, this is huge. We're doing it, deploying it in the Kansas City district, but I can tell you that there has been interest raised throughout the rest of the state of MoDOT. MoDOT's own director is very much a proponent of predictive analytics. He has compiled a team of executive-level people at our Jefferson City office to look more into IMRCP. They're now starting to, they're really beginning to get the impact of what this means for us in terms of being able to fine-tune our operations, both for winter ops as well as throughout the season, because we have weather year-round. We're the heartland. So we are putting a lot of stock in the investment that Federal Highways has made in this. We're very pleased to be their guinea pig of choice for this project. And if anyone has any specific questions or would like to know more specific information following this seminar, Kyle and I are both happy to field those questions. So don't hesitate to take note of our contact information at the end of the webinar, and please let us hear from you if you'd like more information. And I'll sign off with that.
Nancy?
Yes, Kyle. Escape.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, sorry, I want to apologize to the audience here. This is Gabe Guevara. I've been pulled between two meetings, this one and another one. But I want to let everyone know that this model, just as well as all the other models that are created and funded with US DOT taxpayer dollars, are open code, open source. We're posting the documentation and the code on the open source application development portal of the US DOT. You know, we're hoping that at some point, perhaps a TMC, Connected Vehicle Pool Fund study, or some entity as such will take over this model, just as they did in the past with the federal prototype MDSS. And you know, we will do some additional development of the model, but the ownership and hosting of this model long term, it's not going to be with the US DOT. Like Nancy said, I caught what she was saying. If you have any questions, if you have any additional need for information on this model, or if you want to take it for a spin, in some way or some fashion, please get a hold of myself or Nancy or Kyle, and we will help you out. And with that, I will hand it over back to Nilu.
Thanks. I don't see any questions coming up. So I had a question myself that I wanted to ask. So while demonstrating the tool, I see that we went back and forth in time for a few times. So my question is, if there are updates to the information, for example, the weather system forecasted that there's going to be rain at this time, but the rain never happens. So when you go to that time, will that be corrected, or will that just show the prediction?
That's a very good question, and in fact was the focus of a lot of our development efforts in the last phase. Everybody wants to assume time travel should be intuitive, and it's really not. The system keeps not just the actual past conditions, but all of the forecasts as they occurred at all of the times in the past. So if I were to go back in the system to that snow and ice event we had in February, for example, I have to set a reference point in time that I'm going back to. Everything prior to that will be measured data. Everything ahead of that will be a forecast. And if I then move an hour or 2 hours into the future from there, again, everything behind that is now real data, and everything ahead of it is still a forecast, but it's an updated forecast, as it would have been at that new time. So what this enables us to do is not just go back and look at what actually happened in the past, but why did we make the decisions we made? We made that decision because at the time, the forecast said that we would be getting more snow or more rain. We had an example, and I didn't include this in the presentation today, but one of the example storms that we had from last rainstorm from last summer, we actually had an event where we were supposed to get a very, very heavy thunderstorm moving over our study area, and looking ahead in time in the traffic forecast, we saw traffic slowing down just in the last half hour right before rush hour, and we were expecting that essentially traffic would come to a complete crawl. In point of practice, what happened was that the storm went south of our study area. We did not get the thunderstorm, and the traffic was not as slow as had been predicted. But the traffic model was correct. At the time, it said that traffic would slow down because we would get rain. So this time travel thing is not as easy as they want to make it in the movies. You really have to wrap your head around what would I have known at the time when I went back to that time.
Very interesting. Thank you. All right. I can see that we only have 1 minute left. So the PowerPoint slides are now available to you to download directly here, and that includes the contact information for our presenters here today. So if you had any questions in the future, just email them through that contact info. I just want to take a minute and thank everyone, especially our presenters here today. We had very good information shared with you. I hope you found it helpful. Like I mentioned, this was all recorded and will be available through a video plus the presentation. And with that, on behalf of the National Operations Center of Excellence and our presenters, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilu.